I've always been drawn to the old house. It had been weeks since we moved in, yet the weight of its history still lingered in the air. Each room seemed to whisper secrets, its walls heavy with memories, as if they were trying to tell me stories. The house had always belonged to my family, passed down through generations. It was the place where my father grew up, where my grandparents had lived, and yet, there was one room that remained locked away from everyone. I had always been told to stay away from it, that it was forbidden. No one in my family had ever entered it. The door had remained locked for as long as I could remember. No one spoke of it, and when I asked questions, I was always met with a vague silence. They would just say, "Don't go near that room." There were no explanations, just warnings. And yet, I couldn't help but wonder, what was in there? What was so dangerous that no one in my family had dared to open the door? I grew up hearing whispers about that room, but I never thought much of it, dismissing it as some family superstition. But now, here I was, back in the house, and the room, that forbidden room, still haunted my thoughts. One day, while I was exploring the house, I walked past the locked door and noticed something strange. The key was on the table. The key that no one had ever mentioned, the key to the room that had always been off limits. My heart raced. Was this the moment? Was I meant to open it? I hesitated for only a moment before I picked up the key. It was heavy in my hand, its coldness sending a shiver through me. I turned it in the lock. The door creaked open slowly, the sound echoing in the quiet house. The moment it opened, I was hit with a wave of musty air, a smell of dust and decay. The room was dark, and the dim light from the hallway barely illuminated the corners. The silence inside was suffocating. I stepped in cautiously, my pulse quickening. The room was untouched by time, as though it had been frozen in a moment long ago. There were old paintings on the walls, furniture covered in sheets, and the air felt heavy, oppressive. It was as though the room had been sealed away for a reason, and the very atmosphere screamed of forgotten history. As I moved deeper into the room, I felt something watching me. My skin prickled with unease. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, a figure in one of the paintings. It was a man, dressed in a long black coat, his face somber, his eyes locked onto mine. I froze, unable to look away. The eyes of the figure seemed to follow me, a constant, unsettling presence. The silence was broken by a whisper, low and almost inaudible, but unmistakable. "Find me, find me." I looked around, trying to locate the source of the voice. It seemed to be coming from all directions, reverberating off the walls. My heart began to pound in my chest as I stepped closer to the painting. And that's when I saw it. Beneath the portrait, there was a note. It read, "Lucinda, find me. If you do, nothing will ever be the same again." The name struck me like a jolt. Lucinda. Who was she? And why was this man's desperate plea for help written so long ago? The more I stared at the note, the more the room seemed to close in around me. I felt as if the walls were pressing against me, as if the room itself was alive and trying to suffocate me. Suddenly, the room seemed to shift. I turned and saw a dark shadow in the corner of the room, a figure that seemed to materialize from the darkness. A chill ran down my spine. The figure wasn't fully formed, but it was unmistakably there, its presence overwhelming. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. "Don't leave, don't leave." I took a step back, my body trembling, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. There was something compelling me to stay, to uncover the secrets this room held. I couldn't explain it, but I needed to know what had happened here. What had been hidden in this room for so long? My eyes fell upon an old cabinet in the corner, its doors slightly ajar. I approached it cautiously, my hand trembling as I reached for the handles. Inside, there were old, yellowed books stacked on shelves, their pages brittle with age. One book, in particular, caught my attention. It was a leather-bound journal, worn and fragile. The cover had no title, but when I opened it, the first page read, "Lucinda. Help me. If you find me, you'll be free. But you'll never escape." The words sent a shiver through me. Was this some sort of warning? Or was it a cry for help? I wasn't sure, but I had to know more. My hands shook as I turned the pages, each one more disturbing than the last. The entries were written in a frantic scrawl, describing strange events and voices, shadows that seemed to move on their own. It was clear that whoever had written this journal had been driven mad by the things they had experienced. Suddenly, I heard it again. The whisper. It was louder now, clearer. "Help me, release me." I looked up, and that's when I saw it. The figure was closer now, its face almost visible in the dim light. I could see its eyes, black as coal, watching me. I froze in place, my breath catching in my throat. Without thinking, I rushed to the door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. The air grew colder, and the shadows in the room seemed to grow darker, thicker. A feeling of dread washed over me, and for the first time, I truly understood why this room had been locked away for so long. The figure stepped closer, and I realized it wasn't alone. There were others, shadows lurking in the corners of the room, all whispering in unison, "Help us, set us free." I stumbled backward, my mind racing. What was this place? Who were these people, and why were they trapped here? The journal, the voices, the shadows. Everything was connected. I had to find out what had happened. But I wasn't sure I could handle the truth. The figure in front of me raised its hand, its cold, ghostly fingers reaching out toward me. "Lucinda, you have to help us." That was when I realized, Lucinda wasn't just a name. It was me. I wasn't just in the room. I was part of it. The shadows closed in around me, and I screamed, feeling myself being drawn deeper into the darkness. The room was alive, and it had been waiting for me all along. The air was thick with the oppressive weight of the room, and I felt as though the walls were closing in on me. Every inch of space seemed to be filled with an unseen force, like invisible eyes watching my every move. The shadows in the corners had multiplied, and now, they seemed to pulse with life, shifting and undulating like living things. I couldn't breathe properly. My chest was tight, my heart pounding. I had to get out of here. But as I turned toward the door, I realized something. It was no longer there. The door, the one that had opened when I first entered, was gone. There was only a solid wall where it had once been. My breath caught in my throat. No exit. I was trapped. The figures around me were getting closer now. They were indistinct, shifting shadows, but their presence was undeniable. I could feel their coldness, their desperation, radiating out from them like an electric current. Their whispers were growing louder, their voices a chorus of anguish that filled the room. Lucinda. Lucinda, you have to help us. We can't escape without you. I felt my knees weaken. The name, Lucinda, echoing in my ears, was a constant reminder of the inexplicable pull this place had on me. I tried to focus, to calm myself, but the terror was too overwhelming. What did they want from me? Why was I in this room? Why did they call my name? The figure in front of me stepped closer. It was the one I had seen earlier, the man in the painting, his face now just an inch from mine. His eyes were black, endless pits that seemed to suck away any sense of time and space. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out, only the faintest whisper. Release us. Lucinda, you are the key. I stumbled back, heart racing. I didn't know what was happening, but I felt like I was being torn between worlds, one foot in reality, the other in some dark, twisted dimension where these beings lived. Suddenly, my eyes fell on something, a reflection. The dusty, cracked mirror on the wall, half covered by the dark veil of shadow. In the glass, I saw a figure, a woman, standing behind me. She was thin, her face pale and gaunt, her hair long and black. Her eyes, too, were black, just like the man's. And they were locked on me. Lucinda, she whispered in a voice so soft I almost missed it. Find the truth, and you will understand. I spun around, but there was no one there. No woman. Just empty shadows, flickering and shifting. The whispers had become a roar, a maddening cacophony of voices all demanding something from me. I clutched the journal tighter in my hands. It was the only thing that seemed real in this nightmare. I flipped through the brittle pages again, my eyes desperately scanning the words, trying to make sense of the madness. The journal was a collection of frantic notes, but there was a pattern, a name that appeared again and again. Lucinda, help me, set me free. My hands trembled as I read. The journal spoke of a curse, a dark entity that had taken hold of this house. It seemed to have infected my family, and the souls trapped in the room were the result of this entity's power. They had once been people, like me, but they had been consumed by the darkness. Their souls had been bound to this room for eternity. And then, the most chilling revelation of all. Lucinda, you are not the last of your bloodline. You are the one who will break the curse, or become its next victim. I dropped the journal in horror, the implications sinking in. I was part of this. Somehow, I was tied to this cursed history, this haunted house, and these trapped souls. But what did it mean? What was I supposed to do? How could I break the curse when I barely understood it? The whispers intensified, and I felt as though the room was shrinking, the shadows pressing in on me from all sides. The figure in the corner, now fully visible, was standing right before me. The man from the painting. His lips were moving, but his words were lost in the noise of the voices that surrounded me. I reached out a trembling hand toward him. His eyes were filled with sorrow, and his lips parted as though to speak, but the words never came. Instead, a cold hand grabbed mine, pulling me closer. I gasped, but there was no escape. "Lucinda, you must understand," the figure whispered, his voice deep and commanding, "the key lies within you. It always has." His touch was like ice, and a sudden flash of memory struck me. I was back in my childhood, standing in this very room, watching my parents argue about something they never wanted me to know. I saw flashes of faces I didn't recognize, strange symbols, and a sense of dread that filled the house whenever I walked through the door. The same door that was now sealed tight behind me. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my chest. I gasped and looked down to see a dark shadow creeping up from the floor, wrapping itself around my legs, my arms. I was being pulled into the ground, my body sinking, my thoughts scattering. The shadows weren't just surrounding me now, they were part of me, consuming me, pulling me into their world. "Help us!" they cried. "Set us free. You are the key, Lucinda." I tried to fight back, but the shadows were too strong. I could feel them crawling inside me, taking over my thoughts. It was as if they were siphoning away my very soul. Then, a voice, clear, strong, familiar, cut through the chaos. "Lucinda, you have to listen. It's your choice. Break the curse, or be consumed by it." I froze. It was my father's voice. I turned toward the voice, desperate to find him, but there was no one there. Only shadows. Only darkness. The walls of the room began to close in again, and I could hear the final words echoing in my mind. "You have the power, Lucinda. Find the source of the curse, and end it. Or else, it will never end." The shadows grew thicker, pressing against my chest, suffocating me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I was trapped. But then I remembered something from the journal, something that might hold the key to all of this. I took a deep breath, my body screaming with pain as the shadows closed around me. The only thing I could do was reach deep inside myself, to find the strength to fight the curse. To stop the darkness from consuming me completely. And then, the world went black.